The Pentagon was unusually still that morning, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Inside the vast auditorium, the highest-ranking officers in the country sat in perfect rows, medals gleaming, backs straight, expressions unreadable. A place of power, tradition, legacy. And in the middle of it all, tucked away in row 10, seat E, sat Captain Nellie Ford. She kept her shoulders square, her chin slightly down, her cap tilted just enough to cast a shadow across her eyes. Invisibility wasn't failure, it was safety. No one looked her way, no one whispered her name. That was good, that was the plan. Because in this family where strength was measured by volume and respect was earned by conquest, quiet was a liability. And Nellie had learned early, don't draw attention, don't speak first. Don't take up space. She was just here to endure, not belong. Somewhere up front, her father, General Marcus Thorne, sat in the VIP row, stoic, immovable, as if carved from war itself. Beside him, her brother, Mark, the perfect soldier, West Point graduate, family pride, was already exchanging confident glances with other officers. And Nellie, she was background noise in her own story. Until the Master of Ceremonies took the stage. And somewhere between the first medal and the second speech, something shifted in the air. A name, her name. But not the way she was used to hearing it. Not in whispers, not behind closed doors. Loud, echoed, recognized. And just like that, her quiet world shattered. The Master of Ceremonies stepped forward, medals in hand, voice polished like marble. Today, we honor an officer whose contributions have saved not just missions, but lives. Chairs creaked. A few heads tilted. This wasn't on the printed agenda. Through extraordinary linguistic intelligence and cultural decoding, this officer has repeatedly de-escalated violent conflicts, rescued captured personnel, and achieved what brute force could not. The air in the room shifted just slightly. Officers leaned forward, generals glanced sideways. Even Mark, confident and upright, narrowed his eyes. Nellie sat perfectly still. She knew what was coming. But not even she was ready for what came next. Captain? He paused, not for effect, but as if even he couldn't believe what he was about to say. Captain Nellie Ford. A breath caught somewhere in the crowd. One syllable echoed. Then silence. Before the applause could even begin, before the honor could fully land, a chair scraped sharply against the floor. General Marcus Thorne stood up, hard. The Master of Ceremonies froze mid-sentence, caught off guard like the rest of the room. Nellie's eyes darted toward her father, instinctively, involuntarily. His voice, decades of battlefield command, condensed into thunder, exploded through the sound system. 7 languages! He laughed, but it wasn't amusement, it was a weapon. Useless. The army doesn't need soft, delicate bookworms. We need soldiers. We need warriors. The room recoiled. Like a slap had been thrown across every wall. The man who had led battalions had just publicly gutted his daughter, and everyone knew it. For a moment, there was no sound, no breath, no movement, only the echo of her father's voice still hanging in the air like smoke after a blast. Then, one by one, every head began to turn, left, right, until they all landed on her, Captain Nellie Ford, row 10, seat E, the woman who had just been labeled soft, useless. A bookworm in a warrior's world. 100 medals turned in her direction, so did the whispers, and the silence that followed, worse than shame. She felt stripped, as if her skin had been peeled away and her soul laid bare. The uniform she wore, pressed to perfection, now felt like a joke. Her spine stiffened, but her heart collapsed inward. She didn't cry. She didn't blink. She just sat there. burning quietly. Like a candle, no one noticed until someone tried to blow it out in front of the whole world, just when it felt like the room would collapse under the weight of its own silence. A chair in the front row moved. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. General Shepard, the quiet 4-star general whose reputation was built not on noise but on impact, stood up, deliberate, unshaken. He didn't look left or right. He didn't ask permission. He simply rose like a mountain emerging from fog. No medals clanged, no cape flowed, but somehow in that moment he was the loudest man in the room without saying a single word. And every head that had just turned to Nellie now turned to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. General Shepard's words cut cleaner than any shout ever could. His tone was quiet, almost too quiet for a hall that size, but somehow everyone heard it. "Whisper," he said. One word, a call sign, but also a crown. Gasps rippled through the room. Not because it was loud, but because he had called her that. Her father called her weak. General Shepard just gave her a code name, the kind only the most elite earned. Then, turning toward the MC, he added firm, low, unquestionable. "Get her up here. We need her." No applause, no noise, just the thunder of realization. And for the first time in her entire life, Nellie Ford wasn't invisible. She was Whisper, and everyone knew exactly who she was. It started with just one. A colonel in the second row stood up slowly, respectfully. No words, just posture. Then another, and another. One by one, chairs pushed back and boots shuffled against the floor, until the sound of rising uniforms filled the room like a wave breaking on shore. No clapping, no cheering, just silence. Heavy, powerful, absolute. The entire room was standing. For her, for Whisper. Even the generals, even the ones who had never said a word to her, they stood, not because they were told to, they stood because they saw her. After years of being unseen, unheard, unwanted, she was now being saluted. And in that moment, Nellie Ford didn't move, not because she was frozen, but because she had finally been acknowledged. And that stillness, that was her salute back. She didn't rush. She didn't stumble. She walked, past her father, past her brother. Each step echoed louder than any battlefield shout. General Marcus Thorne, the man who once drowned every room with his presence, was now silent. So was Mark, her brother, her rival, her ghost of every family dinner where she was forgotten. They said nothing, because what could they say? She had been dismissed, humiliated, buried beneath their expectations for years. But now she walked like someone who had shed every scar. She walked like someone reborn. And in that silence, as medals gleamed under the lights and soldiers stood tall for her, Nellie Ford wasn't reclaiming her place. She was claiming it for the first time. She was 17, still wearing braces, still believing that if she tried hard enough, they might finally see her. It was Thanksgiving. The house was loud. Turkey sizzling, football on TV. Mark was bragging about getting into West Point. Her father beamed. And Nellie, she sat quietly, her fingers trembling, holding the letter. Georgetown University, full scholarship, linguistics, the dream, the victory. She thought maybe this time they'd be proud. She cleared her throat. "Dad, I got in, full ride, Georgetown." He didn't even look up, just shoved a serving spoon into a bowl of cranberry sauce. "That's nice," he muttered. "Pass the gravy." Then someone handed her a plate. On top of it, a slice of dry turkey, a scoop of stuffing, and her letter folded, smudged, stuck beneath a napkin. No one clapped, no one asked. They didn't even know what linguistics meant. And in that moment, Nellie Ford learned exactly where she stood in her family. Invisible. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't ask what linguistics was. He didn't even finish reading the letter. General Marcus Thorne, the man who could recite battle stats from memory, skimmed a single line, then tossed the letter onto the counter, right next to the turkey carcass, still dripping with cranberry sauce and grease. For a second, Nellie thought he'd missed, but no, he meant it. Her future, her years of work, her dream was lying next to bones and gravy. And when he looked up at her, it wasn't disappointment. It was disinterest. "Real soldiers don't hide behind words," he said flatly. "You want to make a difference? Enlist." She couldn't speak, not because she didn't have words, but because in that moment, words didn't matter. The letter was still there, face down, soaked in gravy, forgotten like it never mattered. And then her father raised his glass, high. "To Mark," he announced, "the future of this family, the pride of West Point." Everyone clapped. Her mother smiled. Mark leaned back in his chair, grinning, soaking in the spotlight. Nellie, she sat there frozen, still holding her fork, still chewing the dry turkey that now felt like cardboard in her mouth. No one noticed her. No one remembered that she'd said anything at all. In that room, she didn't exist. Not as a daughter, not as a scholar, not as a soul with something to give. Just a shadow. She didn't go back to the table. She didn't wait for dessert. She walked up to her room quietly, unseen like always. And once the door closed behind her, she let it fall. The mask, the silence, the hope. She sat on the floor. In her lap, a worn-out dictionary, the one her mother gave her years ago before her voice became a whisper in the house. The pages were yellow, the spine torn, but inside it still held every word Nellie loved. Tonight, though, the words didn't comfort her. They cut. Because for the first time, she realized no word could fix this. No language could make them see her. And so, in the dark, with her tears soaking into page 372 between acknowledge and abandon, she made herself a promise. I won't need their permission to become something they'll never understand. Her name was Nellie Ford. But at boot camp, they called her Georgetown, Bookworm, Living Dictionary. She'd report for drills with laces tight and posture perfect, only to hear someone snicker, "Hey, Professor, you here to diagram our war plans? Or worse, why don't you go talk the enemy to death?" She wasn't strong like the others. She wasn't loud. She didn't punch first. But what they didn't know was she remembered everything. Every face, every insult, every laugh that echoed behind her back. And like every word she ever studied, she stored it, not in bitterness, but in fuel. The room was ice cold, a single lamp, a steel chair, and one man, silent arms crossed, smirking. 2 interrogators had already failed. He wasn't talking, not to anyone in English. That's when they called her. "Ford, give it a shot. Not like we're getting anywhere." She sat down, didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten, just listened. And then, just barely, she caught it, in the man's muttered cursing, a dialect, not standard Spanish. Not even Mexican. Isthmus Zapotec, an endangered language from southern Oaxaca. She switched instantly. The man froze. His eyes widened. And within 2 hours, he broke, tears streaming, confessed everything. Weapons, routes, contacts, names of U.S. officers paid under the table. When she walked out, nobody mocked her. Nobody said a word. They just looked. And for the first time, they saw her. He didn't look like much. Wiry, quiet, eyes always glued to some encrypted screen. Lieutenant Eli Mercer, Cyber Ops, nickname Ghost Drive. People said he could hack a satellite with one hand and write poetry with the other, but no one really talked to him until he showed up at her desk. No sarcasm, no smirk, just a voice like silk. "You cracked that dialect case? The Zapotec variant from Tehuantepec? That was art." Nellie looked up. She waited for the punchline, waited for the mockery, but Eli didn't flinch, He meant it. He didn't look at her like a threat, or a mascot, or a problem. He looked at her like a colleague. No, like a composer, someone who didn't just decode meaning but built it. And just like that, for the first time in uniform, she felt less alone. It started as a joke, not cruel, just quiet. After a tense ops meeting where she calmly dismantled a 14-page intel brief and spotted a flaw no one else had caught, Eli leaned over and said, "You know what your call sign should be? Pause. Whisper." She blinked. "What?" He smiled. "You don't shout, you don't push, but when you speak, everything shifts." She laughed, short, unsure, but he didn't laugh back. He wasn't teasing her. He was naming her, not by rank, not by resume, but by what made her undeniable. From that day forward, when someone called her Whisper, she stood a little taller, because for once, her quiet wasn't a weakness, it was a signature. The call came at midnight, encrypted, no greeting, just a voice she hadn't heard in months. "It's your father." Her spine locked. The last time he said her name, it was to humiliate her in a Pentagon ceremony. "We need a favor," he said. "One line, one edit, that's it." Then came Mark. "You're good with words, right? Make the report cleaner. Omit the part about Norex systems." Her heart stopped. Norex? A weapons contractor? Currently under federal investigation, closely tied to both of them. She leaned against the wall, trembling, not from fear, from fury. "You want me to falsify military intel?" she said, voice flat. A pause. "It's not falsifying. It's cleaning for the family." Family. That word used to mean home. Now it sounded like blackmail. They didn't ask how she was, not once. Not if she was safe. Not if she was sleeping, eating, breathing. Just orders. Just expectation. "You owe this family, Nellie," her father growled. Oh. She remembered the Thanksgiving letter in the cranberry sauce. She remembered being told she was too soft, too weird, too academic. And now she was suddenly useful because they needed a signature, a silence, a cover. "I'm not your daughter," she said softly. A silence, then a scoff. "Don't be dramatic." She closed her eyes, and in that moment, she knew. They never saw her as blood, only a brain to borrow, a mouth to shut, a name to manipulate. She didn't shout, she didn't cry. She just said it like stone dropped in water. "I will not." 3 words, but decades of silence broke behind them. On the other end of the line, nothing. No apology, no plea, just a click, disconnected. It happened on day 3, Bosnia, a peacekeeping checkpoint, routine, until boom, an IED tore through the convoy ahead. She hit the dirt, gunfire, chaos, screams. Through the smoke, she saw them black uniforms, no insignia, not locals. These were trained. This was a message. 2 of her men were down. She crawled, returned fire, called for evac. But in the back of her mind, something else was burning. They knew her location. The route wasn't public. Only a few had access. And 2 of those names, Marcus Thorne. Mark Thorne. She survived the ambush, but her silence did not. They sat in silence. Eli at the console, Nellie beside him, fists clenched. Code ran. Logs decrypted. Silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then, "I've got something," Eli said. "A file, audio, time-stamped 72 hours before the ambush." Voices crackled. "CEO of Norex. She's a liability." Mark Thorne. "Then make her disappear." CEO. "Permanently." Mark. "Make sure it's loud enough to look like war, but quiet enough that no one asks questions." CEO. "Understood. I'll handle it." "Let's ensure it's strong enough to keep her silent. Forever." She froze. They hadn't just tried to silence her, they had tried to erase her. She didn't trust the chain of command, not after what she saw. Too many cracks. Too many shadows. So she bypassed it all. No formal channels. No encryption from the Army's cloud. Instead, she burned it onto a drive, typed a one-line note. "Sir, I'm sending this to you because I believe in only one thing left, Your Honor." She handed the package to a courier she trusted, paid in cash, no names. Then she waited, not as a soldier, not as a daughter, but as a witness ready to speak. It was supposed to be his moment. General Marcus Thorne, the legend, the Iron Fist, the man who never bent. He stood tall, chest puffed, as they prepared to drape the Medal of Honor across his shoulders. Applause rose, and then the screen behind him flickered. One frame, two, then a video. Voices. Mark, make sure she doesn't come back. CEO, done. And the report, Marcus, burn it, I'll handle the press. Gasps echoed. Silence fell like a hammer. The audience, officers, senators, international observers frozen. One line appeared on the screen. Evidence submitted by Captain Nellie Ford. The medal never touched his chest. No one moved. No one clapped. The silence in that hall was not empty. It was full. Full of reckoning. Full of disbelief. General Marcus Thorne, face pale, hands still clutching the medal that would never be his. Behind him, Mark was in cuffs. 2 MPs led him away without a word. Nellie watched. Not with a smirk, not with vengeance, just quiet. And grief, because justice had come. But the little girl inside her, the one who once pressed a Georgetown letter to her heart, had finally stopped hoping. She didn't win a family back. She just stopped pretending she had one. He came to her office not as a general, but as a man broken by truth. In his hand, a small velvet box. Inside, the West Point ring. His. "It's yours now," he said. "You earned it more than I ever did." She didn't touch it, didn't even look at it. "You gave it to Mark before he did anything," she said. "And you offer it to me after nearly everything?" He lowered his head. "I was wrong." Silence. Then, "I don't need your ring," she said. "I needed you, back when you still had a choice." She turned away. He didn't follow. She didn't raise her voice, didn't break down. She simply pushed the box across the desk, slow, deliberate. "Honor isn't in gold," she said. "It's in our actions." The room held its breath. He nodded finally, but it was too late to rebuild what had never been laid. She turned back to her files. The conversation was over, not out of cruelty, but because the time for words was long gone. She didn't retire. She redefined her mission. No more medals, no more noise. Just a white door on the far side of Fort Leonard Wood. And on that door, etched in steel, not gold, the whisper room. Inside, cadets didn't learn how to shout louder. They learned how to listen deeper. They studied empathy as strategy, languages as tools of peace, and silence as power. Nellie Ford no longer needed to prove herself. She had become the kind of leader she once wished to follow. The classroom had emptied, but one young cadet stayed behind, her eyes bright, her voice tentative. "Thank you, ma'am." She paused, then whispered, "No one ever told me that empathy could be a strategy." Nellie smiled softly. She saw herself in that young face, the same doubt, the same hunger, and she knew it didn't matter who recognized you. What mattered was that you choose yourself. That was freedom. That was honor. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on distant fields. They're fought within the walls we call family. In the quiet moments when we choose to stand for ourselves despite being misunderstood or underestimated. Nellie's journey teaches us that true strength isn't about shouting louder or proving others wrong. It's about embracing your unique voice, even if it's a whisper, and having the courage to live by your own values. Your worth isn't defined by the approval of others, not even those closest to you. It's defined by the choices you make every day to honor yourself, to rise above doubt and silence, and to walk your path with integrity. Remember, you don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the softest voice makes the biggest difference. If Nellie's story moved you, if you believe in the power of courage, resilience, and empathy, then join us here at Athena Stories. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story that uplifts, inspires, and reminds us all that our voices matter. Subscribe now, because your story is worth telling and your voice deserves to be heard.